Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Talking Cardboard. My name is Corey, and in today's episode I am going through, in my opinion, the best board games to start your collection with. And leave comments below with some of your favorite recommendations for new gamers to start their board game collection with as well. With that, let's get started. Okay, and like I said, today's video are my top 10 favorite board games that I would recommend to a new gamer to start their board game collection with. And if you feel the games on today's list were great recommendations to start your board game collection with, stay tuned for a future video that will be released here on the channel where I go through my recommendations for next step games. So if these 10 games were a great jumping off point for you and you want something a little bit heavier, a little bit more complex, a little bit more going on, then make sure you check in with the next video where I go through those games that I would recommend if you're looking for a next step up from these 10 recommendations. So let's get started with number 10. Another thing I wanted to mention as we are getting into number 10 is that I did categorize these 10 games with different genres or different categories of mechanisms for board games. And my number 10 recommendation is my first recommendation for a solo game, or what I would consider as a great solo game if you're looking to do more of that in your life, and that is Aeon's End. This is the War Eternal version of the game, but I would definitely recommend either the base Aeon's End or War Eternal as a great jumping off point if you're interested in getting into solo gaming. This game does play 1 to 4 players, but it plays very, very well as a solo game as well. I would say most of the time I am exclusively soloing Aeon's End for the majority of my plays with it. And if I haven't already mentioned it 100 times by now, in the follow-up video I will recommend additional titles on games I would recommend for solo play that are a little bit more complex than the Aeon's End system. But let's just get started here with Aeon's End. What is Aeon's End? So Aeon's End is kind of a deck building game, but it is more of building up your hand of cards, hand management, playing cards to take down a big boss, and trying to stay alive while you're doing that. What makes Aeon's End really unique and cool, especially for solo play, is that the rules don't change very much from solo play, playing all the way up to 4 players. The gameplay essentially stays the same, which I really do enjoy with any of the solo games that I tend to gravitate toward. And in Aeon's End, like I said, you are building up a hand of cards. You are essentially buying cards to build a deck of cards, and you're playing them to try to take down these monsters and eventually kill the final boss. And if you can successfully do that before your hero dies, then you beat the game. You're also trying to protect Gravehold. That starts off with 30 life points. Gravehold is the town that you are trying to protect. If you die in a solo game, you don't immediately lose the game, but if at any point Gravehold gets down to 0 health, that is how you lose. So you are working toward taking down the big final boss. Meanwhile, the final boss is sending out these minion monsters at you that you have to take down, kind of slowing down your roll. It's really unique with the final bosses too. It comes with a wide variety of different variations of the final boss. So every boss feels different as you are playing the game, so it adds some variability into it. It doesn't feel the same. And another thing that makes Aeon's End really stand out as a variable game, it feels different each and every time you play, is that the buy stacks of cards are randomized at the beginning of every game. So in other deck building style games that you may have played before, there are static setups of the piles of cards where you see the same cards each and every game. In Aeon's End, it really turns that on its head, and you randomize the setup each and every time. So some cards might not work very well with the combo and don't combo well with one another, and it really ratchets up the difficulty with cards that don't really gel well together. And that's just one of the hurdles that you have to get around when playing the game, and that makes it really unique and a lot of fun also. So that is Aeon's End. Alright, and the number 9 game that I would recommend when you first start building your board game collection is in the social deduction category, and you just can't go wrong with the Resistance. The Resistance is amazing. It has a lot of tension in every game you play. Putting it down on the table here, looking at the Resistance, it doesn't really look much just looking at the cover of the box. But like it says here, there are secret identities, deduction, and deception. So in the Resistance, to break it down as simple as I can, is you have success cards and failure cards that you are dealing out to each player. Each player is also given a hidden role at the beginning of the game. So your role is either a part of the Resistance, which is a blue card, or you're a part of the Spies, which are the red cards. And depending on which team you're on, that will tell you your overall mission on what you're either trying to succeed or fail during the game. So at the beginning of the game, after you are dealt out the cards to tell you which team you're on, then everybody closes their eyes. All the spy players get to open their eyes and look at who the other spies are, and nobody else will get to know who the spies are throughout the game. Only the spies know who the other spies are. Everybody closes their eyes again, then they all open their eyes, and the game just unfolds from there. So essentially on your turn, when it is your turn, you are sending a set number of people out onto a mission. And the trick in this game is, if you are one of the Resistance players or on the good team, you have to succeed every mission you can. But if you're one of the spies, you can throw in a success card or a failure card to try to throw the scent off of you. After the voting is done on who is being sent out onto the mission, you slide one card secretively face down onto the table, and if all the cards that flip up are successes, then the mission succeeds. If 3 out of the 5 missions succeed, then the Resistance players win the game. But what throws a loop into that is that if only one card of the face down cards is a failure, then the entire mission fails. And then that is 1 point essentially for the spy players. If the spy players can successfully fail 3 out of the 5 missions, then the spies win. So a lot of fun, a lot of kind of pointing out who you think is a spy and who you think is not, and trying to throw the scent off of you if you are a spy, or even if you're a part of the Resistance. It is most often very difficult to convince the other Resistance players that you are on their team, because everybody at some point looks like a spy. So a lot of tension, a lot of table talk, a lot of stand-up and shouting moments in the Resistance. And yeah, I can't say enough great things about this game. So if you are interested in social deduction style games, the Resistance is definitely one that I would start your collection with. All right, and my number 8 game is in the contract fulfillment category. So if you like going out and getting resources or trying to gather different items to fulfill contracts for victory points, this is the category for you. My recommendation for this, truth be told, I could recommend a lot of games in this category, but that's for what that future next steps video is for. But the game I would start with in any board game collection for this category would have to be Coal Baron. So this is the first edition of Coal Baron. They did come out with a second edition recently, so this game is readily available. You can definitely get your hands on it. But like I said, Coal Baron is a contract fulfillment game in sorts. There is a lot of action selections, different worker placement spots on the board. You start off with 20 workers on your team, and you can send out a worker to a location to essentially operate different mechanisms on your player board or gather additional contracts to try to fulfill those for victory points. Like I said, you are sending your workers out to the board to do an action. The first time somebody goes to a spot, it only takes one of your workers. But then if you or somebody else want to go to that same action, they have to contribute one additional worker than the amount of workers that are already there. So if I go to a spot, maybe collect a contract, and another person wants to go to that same spot, they have to then use 2 of their workers to go there. And then on a future turn, if I wanted to go to that same spot and there was already 2 workers there, I would have to contribute 3 of mine to go to that same location. So the 20 workers do get dwindled down in a hurry. The rounds are quick, the gameplay is snappy, a lot of fun. Essentially, like I said, what you're doing is you're trying to collect these coal mine carts, and you're trying to collect coal, operate your elevator to go down into the mine shaft and bring the coal back up to the surface to fulfill contracts. There are different contracts or different companies that want different types of coal for what they are looking to do, and those companies will give you victory points if you can accomplish the goals of those various types of coal. And then also the mode of transportation also plays a factor. Some of the coal can be transported by train, some of the coal is transported by truck or other means of transportation, so you have to keep that in mind as well. And it's a very unique, cool puzzle that plays very quickly, very simple to jump into, and simple to learn the rule set. And once you get going, the game plays so smoothly. So like I said, if you're into contract fulfillment or you think that sounds interesting, definitely start with Coal Baron. It is a lot of fun that you can get the whole family into. It's not a complex game to play, but it does have a lot of replayability and still has enough strategy involved to where this game will stay in your collection for many, many years. It does not overstay its welcome, but the amount of depth and strategy in this game is definitely a lot of fun trying to get those various types of coal up to complete different contracts. So that is Coal Baron. Okay, and board game recommendation number 7 is in the 2-player category of games. So if you and a good friend, or you and your spouse or a significant other are the main players that you can get to the table the most often to play a game, then this game in the 2-player category will definitely be a good pick for that. And I would recommend starting your collection with Raptor. Raptor, a ton of fun. Another game that is easy to play and understand, but that provides a lot of strategic depth. And it is a 2-player only game. So like I said, if you're looking for a 2-player game, this will definitely be a great pick for you. So essentially in Raptor, one player takes the role of the scientist, the other player takes the role of the velociraptors, and you have unique asymmetric goals with what you're trying to do depending on what team you're on. The scientists are trying to capture enough of the raptors to bring them back to the lab and study them. The raptors are trying to escape from the scientists trying to capture them. What I really enjoy in this game is that the board is very tactical. There's a lot of strategy involved. There's trying to outwit your opponent and trying to outguess what they're going to do and play the right card at the right time. So essentially what you have is a hand of 9 cards. They're all numbered 1 through 9, only one of each number, and the cards will do a couple different things for you. The first thing the cards will do for you are the basic actions. And what that means, the basic actions are essentially how you either attack or move around the board. And the way this game works is that each player takes one card out of their hand, places it face down, and reveal that card at the same time. And depending on the value of the cards, so for example here on the box, if the Raptor player played a 9 and the scientist player played a 2, then the Raptor player, the difference being 9 minus 2 is 7. So that Raptor player would have 7 basic actions, or essentially 7 movement points, move and or attack points. You can spend those action points in different ways, but 7 points of actions to do their turn with. And then whoever played the lower value card doesn't get the difference in actions. Obviously, it's because the card value is lower, but they get the special effect that is printed on the card instead. So, like for example, here the scientist player gets to add 2 more scientists onto the board because they had played a lower card than their opponent. So it's a lot of fun trying to decipher when to play a higher card than your opponent, trying to outguess if they're going to be playing a low card or a high card, depending on if you want your card to be lower for that action on the card, or if you want your card to be higher so you can perform those basic actions. There's just a whole lot of trying to outwit your opponent. So that's what I really enjoy in Raptor, and the theme really pours through strong as well. It really feels like when you're the scientist player, you are doing very different actions than if you are the Raptor player. So that is Raptor. All right, and my number 6 board game is in the tile placement category. So if you really enjoy the laying of tiles, trying to combo with tiles to get points, and the spatial element of it all and putting them together in various ways, then this is the style of game for you. And the game I recommend all the time to new gamers to start your collection with is Queen Domino. Queen Domino, like I said, it's pretty much like dominoes. You have different tiles that you are placing down in front of you, but depending on the edges that are touching each of the tiles, that'll score you different various points at the end of the game. In Queen Domino, it's got a unique action selection system where all the tiles are numbered. The higher the number tile, the more valuable it is. So for example, if you draft the highest value tile, which is the strongest, most valuable tile, you are then last to decide on the next row of tiles for the next round. So there's a lot of push and pull with that on, do I choose a weaker tile so I get a better selection at the next round of tiles, or do I just go for that strongest tile and not worry about turn order? So there's a lot of play and depth into that. After you draft the tile, you are placing it in front of yourself. All the different tiles, you need to line up the different edges based on the type of land it is. So for example here, you've got 3 tiles worth of water, and it's got 1 crown on one of the tiles. So as long as they're touching, you've got an area of 3 times the 1 crown. So at the end of the game, that area would score you 3 victory points, 3 times the number of crowns. Other tiles might have more crowns on it. For example, this black tile here has 2 crowns. It's only one area of tile, so 2 times 1, that would score you 2 victory points just for that one tile. But you're trying to configure your board in a 5x5 grid in the best format that you can. There's also these red tiles that you can purchase, these unique scoring tiles, to build them on top of the red zones, and that adds a lot of variability to the different ways you can score victory points in this game. Also, very fast playing game, plays up to 2 to 4 players, plays in, it says 25 minutes, which is pretty accurate. About 25-30 minutes. You can really lay this game down, get a good game of it in about a half an hour, and it plays with a lot of strategy in depth in that half an hour. So if you enjoy the tile laying concept, or you think you would enjoy a tile laying game, then Queen Domino is definitely the one to start with in your board game collection. All right, my number 5 board game recommendation is in the route building category of games. So if you think you'd enjoy the concept of trying to build out these routes, connecting routes around the board, and trying to connect different territories to gain victory points that way, then the game I would start with is one that you've probably heard of many, many times by now. It's sold millions and millions of copies, but that is Ticket to Ride. So I've got here the Ticket to Ride Legacy box. This is the only version of the game I currently have in my collection, but I think just the basic either American or European version of Ticket to Ride is where you'd want to start. The Legacy style definitely turns everything on its head. It creates more of a story element, an ever-changing board. Different things are happening in the game. It's a lot more complex and a lot more involved, but I would definitely start with the base game of Ticket to Ride if you would like route building. So in Ticket to Ride, as you can see here, there are different types of train cards that are different colors. On your turn, it's very simple. You can grab up to 2 different cards from a row of cards and take them into your hand, and you are trying to match the amount of colors necessary to build out your routes. As soon as you have enough cards to build out a route between 2 cities, you can then turn them in and then place the train car pieces onto that route to connect the 2 cities. And in the basic version of Ticket to Ride, you start with these ticket cards in your hand that show a connection point between 2 cities. And it says, hey, if you can connect a route between these 2 cities across the map, you can turn that in for that set amount of points, and then you can get a new ticket to your hand. And you keep multiple tickets in your hand at all times, so you're trying to go after these routes, but your opponents are trying to connect their cities as well, and they're getting in your way. If both of the routes are blocked between 2 cities, you have to go around it, so you would have to spend more train cards to go around. You're trying to find the easiest, quickest path between your 2 cities, but like I said, your opponents are blocking you and blocking your way a lot of the time as well. So really trying to puzzle that out is a lot of fun. So that is the most simple form of route building on the market, but definitely a fun one that you can get your family involved with, you can get your friends involved with. Gamers will enjoy it, non-gamers will enjoy it. Definitely, there's a reason why it sold millions of copies. So if you like the idea of route building, I would definitely start with Ticket to Ride. All right, and the number 4 game I would recommend to start your board game collection with is in the worker placement category. Worker placement, this is one of the very first genres that I started my personal collection with, and I really enjoy what that mechanism does for gameplay and strategy. So the game I would recommend first in this category to start any collection with is Stone Age. Stone Age is a fantastic introductory worker placement game that has a lot of unique elements with it. So in Stone Age, there is a lot going on, but is simple enough to understand within the first 10 minutes of playing your first game. There is some contract fulfillment and trying to gather resources to build these different huts or build out these special action cards to give you bonuses and victory points. But the essential main core mechanism that drives what you're doing is worker placement. Everybody starts off with a tribe of workers that you are sending to the board to collect resources. Depending on the number of tribespeople that you send to a specific location, that'll tell you how many dice you can roll to try to collect resources with. The more valuable the resource, the harder it is to collect. So for example, if I was trying to fulfill a requirement on a hut or on a card that requires wood, and I don't have any wood, I need to go to the forest to try to collect some of that wood. Let's say I send 2 of my tribespeople to the forest to try to collect some wood. I would roll out 2 dice based on the 2 tribespeople that I sent to that location, and wood is divisible by 3. So for example, if I rolled 2 5s, so I had a total of 10 on the dice, I would divide that by 3, rounding down, and collect 3 wood for those 2 tribespeople. They would then come back to my player board and collect the 3 wood for my tribe. Same concept holds true for brick and stone and gold. It's off the board here, it's not shown in the picture, but you've got brick, stone, and gold that you can go collect as well. So for the wood, it was divisible by 3, the brick is divisible by 4, the stone is by 5, and the gold is by 6. So for example, if I sent two tribespeople to the river to try to collect gold, it's divisible by 6. So let's say I roll that same really good roll of 2 5s. So I have a total value of 10 on the dice. Divisible by 6, rounded down, I'm only collecting 1 gold for that, whereas I was getting 3 wood doing the same thing in the forest. So it's really cool how that is. You're trying to push your luck. You're trying to send enough tribespeople to different locations that will get you the resources needed to fulfill these cards and contracts on the bottom of the board. There are tools that you can gather that help mitigate your die roll and essentially add more value to the dice that you're rolling. There is a hut that you can send 2 tribespeople to gain an additional tribesperson to your tribe, to have more workers to send out to locations in the future. So there's a lot of unique, cool things going on in this game. Very streamlined and simple, but a lot of strategic depth, and is the first worker placement game that I started with in my collection many years ago, and I still have it in my collection today. So that just tells you how great of a game it is. Yes, it's more on the introductory side to worker placement itself, but it's a mainstay in my collection for how streamlined and simple it is to teach and play, but also enough strategy to where I've played this game probably about 100 times by now, and I still enjoy playing it. So that is Stone Age. All right, and my number 3 board game recommendation is in the racing games category. If you really like turning up the speed and racing around a track, and you like trying to be faster than your opponents to win the race, or in this recommendation, trying to bet on different cars in the race to have the most money by the end of the race, then the racing category might be for you. My first recommendation, like I said, in other recommendations on this list, there are many other games in this category that I could have chosen, but I think Downforce is the game that I would start your collection with if you're into racing style games. But like I said, in Downforce, it's not just about the racing. You are also betting money on different cars during the race on who you think will win the race. So you bid, race, and win. There's a little bit more variability, a little bit more going on than just, hey, I want to win the race. This one is you actually want to have the most money by the end of the race to win the game. Throughout the game, you can purchase different vehicles to be your own personal vehicle. So if they do take first, second, third place in the race, you get more money for them actually winning the race than you would if you did not own that vehicle. But there are other different betting points around the board depicted by these yellow lines that as soon as a car crosses that line, you are then placing your bets on the order that you think the colored cars are going to finish the race. So what order you think is going to take first, second, third, fourth, fifth place, and you get bonus money at the end of the game for that. But I really like the dynamic in that. I like the bidding over what cars you think will win the race, but also the ability to purchase vehicles as your own. So if your vehicle does end up winning, you get bonus money for that. But I also like the simplistic way this game plays. You just have a hand of cards that have different colors on the card with different amounts of movement points on it. And when you play a card on your turn, you are moving all the cars of that color that amount of spaces. So yes, you are helping some of your other opponent's vehicles continue on around the track, but you want to make sure you're playing the card that helps your specific cars get farther ahead than your opponent's cards. So you simply play a card, move those cards, and keep on going around the track. As soon as they cross the line, you bid again on who you think is going to win the race. They cross the second line, and then you can bid again. You can even change the order of cars on how you think they will finish the race at that point, or you can just keep your bid the same and the order of cars the same as you had the first time, and then you do that a third time, and by the time the race finishes, the game ends, and you count up how much money you were awarded, and the player with the most most money wins. So a lot of fun, a lot of tension. It's really cool on when you play a card, you are helping your opponent's vehicles out along with your own vehicles. So everybody feels like they're progressing and not being left out or left behind. So there is that sense of progression at all times, which keeps it interesting. And then the purchasing of different vehicles and the bidding at those different positions on the racetrack just keeps it interesting and fun. And you just hope to have the most money by the end of the race. So that is Downforce. All right, to my board game recommendation number 2 is in the dice action category, where you're using dice specifically to run the actions that you're doing in this game. And if you like the idea of rolling some dice and using them to do actions, I would start your collection with an old game called Kingsburg. And I think Kingsburg is up to its 3rd or 4th edition by now. This is the 1st edition of the game, but all of them play the same. And honestly, the only difference is in the original version, you did have to purchase a separate expansion to get variable player boards. Whereas in the new editions of the game, it just comes with those variable player boards already in the core box. So that is really nice if you purchase a newer version of Kingsburg. On your turn, you are rolling 3 dice and you're choosing which of the king's advisors you are placing your dice on to gather resources or various actions to then build out different buildings on your player board. And the different buildings will give you various other actions, other effects that are unique to you. It'll give you endgame scoring and victory points. So you're trying to build up your kingdom better than your opponent's kingdoms. And like I said, you're just doing that with dice placement actions. You roll those 3 dice out. Depending on the value of the advisor, that is the exact number on your dice that you need to trigger that action. So you can combine dice. You can combine all 3 dice into one big action. Let's say, like the king itself at the top, it has an action value of 18. So if you roll 3 6s, that is pretty much the only way that you can trigger the king's action for the most amount of resources and action effects with the king. But you can split those dice up as well. So for example, if I rolled a 1, 3, and a 4, I could use the 3 and 4 to trigger the number 7 advisor action and use my number 1 die to trigger the number 1 advisor. So you can split them up and kind of pick and choose how you do that. Also, at the end of each round, you have monsters that are invading your kingdom. So you have to have enough attack power and defense power to fend those off. So you're really trying to balance your defense value and your attack value with gathering the resources to build up the different structures and buildings within your kingdom. And the decision space and variability with that is very unique each time. And it provides for a new feeling game every time. Like I said, if you do pick up the original version of Kingsburg, I would highly recommend picking up the expansion for it that makes the starting board for each player completely unique and you feel different than your opponents every time you play. Otherwise, in the 1st edition of the game, the static boards are all the same for all the players, and the game can kind of feel samey after multiple plays after a while. So I would definitely pick up that expansion. But if you have, I believe it started with the 2nd edition, but if you pick up the 2nd, 3rd, or whichever edition is the newest out there that you can find, then it automatically comes with those variable starting boards in the core box itself. If I had no games in my collection back here at all and I was starting fresh again, this would definitely be one of the first games that I would recommend with starting your new collection with. So that is Kingsburg. So finally, the number 1 board game I would recommend to any person looking to start a board game collection, and this is in the deck building category, and it is the granddaddy of all deck building, the one that pretty much started it all. It's the most streamlined, the most smooth playing deck building. It's deck building in its purest form, but it is one that should not be missed for any board game collection. And it's actually one of the very first games, again, if not the first game I started with in my hobby collection of board games way back in the day, and that is Dominion. It plays 2 to 4 players and plays in about 30 minutes. Like in most Euro-style games, you are just trying to build up a deck of cards and play different action cards to have the most victory points by the end of the game. But like I said, Dominion is deck building in its purest form. You have 10 stacks of cards to start every game, and those are the only cards you'll be able to purchase and use for the entire game. There are multiple variations of cards that come in the core Dominion box, and there's like 30 plus expansions at this point that add variable cards to each and every game as well, and different suggested ways to play the game with different setups. But even in the base box of Dominion, there's so much variability in so many different ways to set up the game that it never gets old. But like I said, in the beginning of setup, you can either select 10 random cards or select one of the recommended setups. And as soon as those 10 cards are selected, you take the stack of cards for each of those type of card and place it down in the center of the table. And those will be the only cards that you are allowed to purchase and send to your deck throughout the entire game. And essentially what you're doing is you're trying to purchase cards to send them to your discard pile, and as soon as your draw pile runs out, you shuffle everything back together from the discard pile and continue drawing cards. You have a hand of 5 cards at the start of every round, and you are playing them down to combo with one another for more coins or more actions or more buying. It's an ABC style game. So you have your actions, you can then buy cards, and then you clear your cards back into your deck. So A, B, C, D. And so that keeps everything really streamlined and simple. But with that, what that's allowing you to do when you're building out these combos or buying specific cards to your deck to be unique from your opponent's decks is you're trying to have all the cards play off of one another the best you can and the combo with them the best you can. The more actions you have on your turn, the more cards you can play. The more buy power you have on your turn, the more cards you can purchase to your deck. And then in order to purchase those cards, you need cards that generate coins on it as well. There are also some cards that attack your opponents. So here you need a castle moat to protect your city from people attacking you, which will generally take down your hand sizes of cards. You have to discard some cards out of your hand so you don't have as many cards to use. So you're trying to protect yourself from those attacks, but also trying to generate the biggest combos to then play more cards down in front of you, buy more cards, generate enough coins to purchase those cards. The more expensive the card, the better the actions are on it. And you're just building that engine, and you keep building it and building it, making it better and better, more combo-tastic, more smooth, more streamlined playing as you're playing, and just trying to help everything gel together so well to the point where you can start purchasing these victory point cards where you've got the estates, the duchies, and the provinces that give you victory points. You don't want to purchase these victory point cards to your deck too soon because those don't have any actions associated with those cards. They essentially just clog up your deck throughout the game. So about mid to mid-late game, you start purchasing these victory point cards, adding them to your deck, and then eventually after 3 stacks of cards in the center of the table run out, that is when the game ends, and whoever has the most of these victory point cards left in their deck at the end of the game is the winner. So again, very smooth gameplay, very streamlined, very simplistic. It is just deck building in its purest form, and one that I keep going back to even after all of these years. A lot of variability, especially with the expansions. This game never gets old. Like I said, in a future video coming up here on the channel, I will have other recommendations that build off of the deck building mechanism, but Dominion is what started it all. So if you want deck building in its purest form added to your collection, I would highly recommend starting with Dominion first, because that will be the gateway into the deck building mechanism that will help you understand how other games were formed or how these other newer games have built off of the structure of the deck building mechanism itself and just kind of evolved off of that. So still nothing against Dominion at all, it being such a pure simplistic form of deck building, because it is still that great of a game and one that I play to this day. It never gets old. It will always be in my collection forever. But like I said too, if you are interested in building off of the deck building mechanism into more complex versions of it that have built off the core deck building mechanism that Dominion started, then stay tuned for that future video. But I would definitely recommend this be the first game that you add to your personal board game collection to really kickstart your collection and add that spark of motivation into what makes modern gaming so great. So that is Dominion. Alright, and there you have it. That is it for today's list of my top 10 games I would highly recommend you start your personal board game collection with. If you are a new gamer, I would highly consider starting your collection with these 10 games. If you are a seasoned gamer and are just here to listen to my opinions on what I think others should start their game collection with, leave comments below on what you would recommend and what you would suggest that might be different than my recommendations. So until next time, you all have a great day and have fun gaming.